Today's episode is sponsored by Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right below this video. So the Republican National Convention continued yesterday. Yesterday was day 2. It was definitely a different day than day 1. There was less screaming from the speakers, although Eric Trump did a little bit of screaming. But it was sort of a weaker day from the standpoint of making the case that Donald Trump should be reelected. Some of the major speeches yesterday, including Melania Trump's, said a lot, but didn't actually explain why what they said means or points to reelecting Donald Trump. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But if I had to sort of give a very broad overview, day 1 was erratic screaming, Kimberly Guilfoyle, Donald Trump Jr., whereas day 2 was more trying to be more precise, trying to be more calm about the Trump administration being a real administration, a respectable administration, and having earned 4 more years, but failing to do so and not really making that case. And it also included, day 2 did, some horrible breaches of protocol, possibly even of the law. Before day 2 even started, by the way, one of the speakers was removed from a montage because it was revealed that she previously tweeted anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. This was Marianne Mendoza. Her police officer's son was tragically killed by a drunk driver. She was going to be included in a list of speaker excerpts, remarks, and it became known that she had previously retweeted a thread on Twitter promoting anti-Semitic conspiracies. So she was pulled from the evening program. I mean, just every detail beyond parody and exactly what the stereotypes about these types of events are, actually meeting that standard, that expectation, conforming to it. Melania Trump spoke from the White House Rose Garden. Now, it was a rose garden devoid of roses. Very strange updates to the landscaping made in advance of Melania Trump's speech, which shouldn't even have taken place. Really, the White House not supposed to be used as a political prop, not supposed to be used for political events. And they did. There will be no repercussions. Don't even think about it. I know it's frustrating, but there's just not going to be any repercussions for that. But the most notable thing to me from day 2 was the degree to which it was filled with bold-faced lies, provable lies. And this was another distinction from day 1. Not only less screaming on day 2, day 1, more optics and propaganda that are less simply factually false. Day 1 had a lot of North Korea-like imagery from Kimberly Guilfoyle. Obviously nonsense, but not as many straight-up factual lies. Yesterday was just laughable, obvious, provable, empirical lie after lie, and we're going to go through some of them. Maybe the funniest was when former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi claimed that what she did as Florida Attorney General was fight corruption. Check this out, and then I'll remind you why it's so wild.
But for Joe Biden, it's been the land of opportunism, not opportunity. As a career prosecutor and former Attorney General of Florida, I fought corruption, and I know what it looks like, whether it's done by people wearing pinstripe suits or orange jumpsuits.
Pam Bondi says that she fought corruption as Attorney General in Florida. She was investigating Trump University as Attorney General in Florida. Trump donated to her reelection campaign, and the investigation went away. And she has the audacity to brazenly say that she fought corruption as Attorney General in Florida. She was corrupt as Attorney General in Florida. Pam Bondi also criticized Joe Biden for nepotism, and then was followed up yesterday by Tiffany Trump, Eric Trump, and Melania Trump. Again, Saturday Night Live can't do anything with it. It's beyond parody. Tiffany Trump did speak, as I mentioned. She's Donald Trump's sort of less public daughter. It wasn't really clear. It hasn't been clear that Tiffany Trump likes her dad. And it certainly wasn't clear yesterday, but she did speak. She bizarrely claimed that people are enslaved by the media and coerced by the media and by tech giants. Very unusual imagery. Take a look.
Of who we are voting for may and are being manipulated and visibly coerced by the media and tech giants. If you tune into the media, you get one biased opinion or another. And what you share, if it does not fit into the narrative that they seek to promote, then it is either ignored or deemed a lie, regardless of the truth. This manipulation of what information we receive impedes our freedoms. Rather than allowing Americans the right to form our own beliefs, this misinformation system keeps people mentally enslaved.
Enslaved. I mean, really powerful language. Tiffany's speech, again, it wasn't just low energy. It didn't make the case for Donald Trump's reelection. And that was what was interesting about a lot of the speeches yesterday, including Melania's, which we're going to get to, which was that so much was said, but it wasn't clear why anybody should vote for Donald Trump on the basis of the speeches that were made. Trump's son, Eric Trump, spoke. And again, lame lies, nonsense. But here is one of the whoppers that Eric told, just making things up out of thin air.
In the Middle East, never-ending wars were finally ended.
Now, of course, Donald Trump did not achieve peace in the Middle East. You probably know that. Donald Trump did not end any wars. You probably know that. It just didn't happen. These are provable empirical lies. We then heard from Trump economic advisor Larry Kudlow, who showed up and just told a complete fantasy about the Trump administration's handling of coronavirus and, in that context, the economy. Take a look at this one.
Once in 100-year pandemic, it was awful. Health and economic impacts were tragic. Hardship and heartbreak were everywhere. But presidential leadership came swiftly and effectively with an extraordinary rescue for health and safety to successfully fight the COVID virus.
So, to his credit, Larry Kudlow didn't seem drunk this time. That's good, but he wasn't making any sense anyway. And of course, this administration did not put together the brilliant health and economic plan that Larry Kudlow wants us to believe they put together. And in fact, the Trump administration response was one of the worst responses to the virus in the world and led to not only unnecessary death, but also unnecessary economic destruction. They didn't create the virus. They're not responsible for the virus, but they are responsible for one of the worst responses. Larry Kudlow also, by the way, as many speakers did on day one and on day two, Kudlow refers to coronavirus and the pandemic in the past tense. You might be interested to know, just to be anchored to reality, that coronavirus killed another 1,291 people in the United States yesterday alone. They continue to pretend that it's over, and they need to. They need to, and that's why they've been doing it for months. Coronavirus ranks as one of the most important issues for voters and one of the ones where Donald Trump has the lowest approval rating, so they have to pretend it's over. They have to claim that Donald Trump managed it very well. Now, one of the propaganda elements that's concerning many people from yesterday is that uniformed members of the military were pulled into the evening, which isn't supposed to happen. For example, we're showing video of uniformed Marines when Donald Trump did a naturalization ceremony at the White House for new citizens. Marines and members of the military are not supposed to be political figures in political videos, and the entire night was filled with this. Now, the response from the White House was, these events were White House formal events. The video was then made public, and the public video was then used at the RNC. So at the time that the uniformed Marines were filmed, these were not political events, but they were White House events. I don't think I have to say too much more about that reasoning. Another propaganda element was Trump springing a pardon on a guy after a whole propagandistic montage. And again, Donald Trump creating something out of nothing. Take a look at this video. Listen to this.
To join us as I grant John, I'm not sure you know this, a full pardon. So I don't know if you know that, Jamie. Come on over here. It's just an honor. And you have done incredible work.
Thank you, sir.
And all of Las Vegas and all of Nevada and all of every place in this country is very proud of you. The job you've done, bringing people back. And you're right, I was supposed to be there for 5 minutes. I stayed for an hour and a half because it was so interesting to me. Congratulations.
You really get the sense that Donald Trump doesn't really understand what he's doing, but he imagines or envisions that it looks great to people and that they're going to be incredibly moved by it when it's just awkward more than anything else. And then the night capped off, the keynote of the evening last night was Melania Trump, a very long speech, completely meandering. If you said, what was the speech about? I couldn't tell you. There was really no arc to it. There was no coherent narrative. And it certainly didn't make the case for why Donald Trump should be reelected. Donald Trump did not seem pleased during it. In fact, as we're showing people, he looked like very much like he was not enjoying himself every time that the camera would cut to him during the speech. And it was a lame speech. Here's a few moments. Melania saying that Donald Trump, this is funny, that Trump doesn't play politics. And even she seems to have a hard time believing that.
Donald wants to keep your family safe. He wants to help your family succeed. He wants nothing more than for this country to prosper, and he doesn't waste time playing politics.
Now, oh yeah, what I didn't like was I saw a lot of people supposedly on the left, for example, during my live streams yesterday, ridiculing Melania for her accent. Listen, she's not from the United States. People have accents when they learn languages as adults. I do think it's beneath us to go after her for her accent. We should go after Donald Trump because he has one position on immigration. And then we learned that his wife was working in the United States at a time when she was not authorized to work in the United States. That's against the law. That's fair game. Melania's parents got special treatment and became citizens. Melania got an Einstein visa. All of that is completely fair game. Her accent is not fair game for me. I think the left should stay away from that. I think it does absolutely nothing for us. Now, here Melania Trump seems to sort of find the solution to racism in some weird way. Take a look.
With that in mind, I like to call on the citizens of this country to take a moment, pause, and look at things from all perspectives. I urge people to come together in a civil manner so we can work and live up to our standard American ideals. I also ask people to stop the violence and looting being done in the name of justice, and never make assumptions based on the color of a person's skin.
Yeah, guys, I mean, just stop the violence, stop the looting, and stop the racism. Oh, all right. And then again, how that links to Trump's reelection is beyond me. There were some really cringy applause lines where it sort of became clear that people were supposed to clap, but always like half a beat too late. For example, Melania pausing when she said that she became a citizen after passing a test. And it was just really, really awkward.
But I wanted more. I wanted to be a citizen. After 10 years of paperwork and patience, I studied for the test in 2006 and became an American citizen.
So again, the real critique of this speech is there was no coherent story. There was no coherent arc. It was terribly written. But more importantly, these musings from Melania Trump don't make the case effectively for Donald Trump's reelection. Now, you and I would say you can't possibly make that case because he doesn't deserve to be reelected. And I would agree with you. But typically, no matter how bad a first term has been, a convention speech is able to put together a story at least plausibly justifying, if you buy into it, the reelection of the sitting president. Melania's speech didn't even do that. And quite frankly, for all we know, she doesn't even want Donald Trump to be reelected. My sense from day one has been she didn't want to be the first lady of the United States. She just wanted to marry a rich guy and travel from penthouse to penthouse on Trump's private plane. I don't think she really wants any part of this. I don't think it's been particularly good for her. And again, yesterday we learned that she has been caught on recordings disparaging Donald Trump, disparaging Trump's adult children. It's not even clear she wanted to be giving this speech, but it is what it is, I guess, to quote Donald Trump. Tonight is night 3. We're expecting, scheduled, although always subject to change. If someone gets caught tweeting something anti-Semitic, they may be pulled. But we're expecting Vice President Mike Pence tonight, his wife Karen Pence, a bunch of other members of Congress, Kellyanne Conway, who recently announced she's quitting in 5 days. She's scheduled to speak tonight. Eric Trump's wife, Lara Trump, expected tonight. So join me for day 3. I'll be starting the live coverage on our YouTube and Twitch channels at about 8:15 p.m. Eastern time, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, 5:15 p.m. Pacific, and like 2 a.m. Western Europe time. A lot of people staying up late with us for these conventions. Join me tonight. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts via Twitter. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. You can find me there.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist, and what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month. And you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, today's new members of the day are Ann Doyle and Valerie Niederhofer. Ann and Valerie, thank you so much for signing up. Also, big thank you to David Horwitz, who's today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Membership, it's what's for dinner. Grab one at joinpakman.com. Today, Hatriot Mail does make a triumphant return to the show. If you don't remember what Hatriot Mail is, here's a reminder.
We're getting to the oranges of this investigation. So God bless United States of America. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Yeah, so Hatriot Mail is when a professional voiceover artist does interpretive readings of the hate mail that I get. Here is one from someone who simultaneously seems just obsessed with me, but also seems to very much dislike me.
Who is David Pakman? Is he married? And Fatard below me is correct. Women pick their man. I mean, she should have married you, a loser YouTube commentator. She seems like she has an okay life. First world problems, huh? Pakman, you are a loser. Sign up to become Unhinged Loon with Pakman. Report the news of Trump's victories. I'm not a fan of David Cookhold Pakman.
Surprisingly, or maybe not, I mean, maybe this is actually a common psychological phenomena. It's really common that some of the people who seem to despise me the most because of my political views and the program I host also seem obsessed with the minutia of everything I'm doing, everything I'm saying, my life and whatever else. It's actually not altogether uncommon among Hatriots. And maybe that's surprising. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But remember that you can fight Hatriotism in your communities by using the coupon code Hatriot40. Any membership at joinpacman.com can be instantly discounted by 40% with the coupon code Hatriot40. The Hatriots hate it when that coupon code is used, and it's spelled Hatriot 40. Okay, Hillary Clinton. We've heard from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton says that Joe Biden should not concede the election to Donald Trump in the immediate aftermath of November 3rd under any circumstances until and if it becomes clear that Joe Biden has actually lost the election. There's an interesting new interview. Clinton was interviewed by Jennifer Palmieri for the Showtime program, The Circus, and right-wingers are losing their minds about what Hillary said. Sean Hannity is feverishly tweeting about it. People are going crazy. It's really not a big deal, actually. What Hillary Clinton says makes a lot of sense. And in fact, it shouldn't even be super controversial. Let's take a look at it, then we'll discuss.
So we've got to have a massive legal operation. And I know the Biden campaign is working on that. We have to have poll workers. And I urge people who are able to be a poll worker. We have to have our own teams of people to counter the force of intimidation that the Republicans and Trump are going to put outside polling places. This is a big organizational challenge, but at least we know more about what they're going to do. And, you know, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, because I think this is going to drag out. And eventually, I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch, and if we are as focused and relentless as the other side is.
So this is actually good advice. And Democrats sometimes are pushovers. Let's be completely frank. And there really is no incentive to concede early, period. Now, people like Sean Hannity and others are pretending that what Hillary Clinton is saying is never concede no matter what, even if you lose the popular vote and the electoral vote handily, and there's no foul play that appears to have taken place, and there's no... That's not what Hillary Clinton is saying. Hillary Clinton is astutely pointing out Trump is not going to concede if it's close. Trump is going to claim that it's rigged. Donald Trump is trying to rig it and planning to rig it. So why should Joe Biden concede if there's any possibility that he actually won? Now, this could be because of mail-in ballots that have maybe will not yet be counted as of November 3rd at midnight. That's one possibility. It could be because of other types of voter suppression. It could be for any number of different reasons. And I was actually thinking back to the year 2000, which 2000 was sort of the first presidential election I paid close attention to. I remember I was in high school and there were, you started to figure out who are the few right-wing kids in my very liberal high school and who's following politics and who's not. And I remember paying close attention to that election. It was Bush v. Gore. And it came down to Florida, as many of you may remember. Al Gore won the popular vote nationally, ultimately lost Florida. And when people think back to that, I was recently talking to people who misremember the crux of what happened in the year 2000 in Florida. A lot of people correctly remember that there was a recount started in Florida, and that then Republican Secretary of State in Florida, Katherine Harris, got involved. Ultimately, the Supreme Court stopped the recount, and the state went to George W. Bush by about 500 votes. And when people think back now, they often think if the Supreme Court hadn't stopped the recount, Al Gore would have won Florida and thus would have won the presidency. That's not likely the case, because there was a secondary controversy in Florida in the year 2000, the details of which people still argue about, but it was about votes sent in by mail, many from overseas, a bunch of different scenarios, a bunch of different ballots, which were misplaced and thrown out and just disappeared. Okay. So the exact details are less relevant than the realization that in all likelihood, The recount that was stopped, George W. Bush was probably going to win that recount if it had been completed. The real problem was the problem of the ballots that were not going to be part of the equation, that were gone. And likewise, in this upcoming election, there are likely to be a ton of different layers in the subterfuge, including mail-in absentee ballots, voter suppression, voter purges, meddling of different kinds, Trump trying to use the judges that he so famously has appointed to his advantage, on and on and on. And so what Hillary Clinton is suggesting is not that if Joe Biden loses fair and square, he never concede. What Hillary Clinton is suggesting is that until it is really, truly all completely said and done, and it is completely clear that Joe Biden has lost, there is no reason for Joe Biden to concede. Now, I think we also have to remember, because people are going crazy, pulling their hair out about over this as if Hillary Clinton is saying something crazy. Remember that conceding is merely a formality. It doesn't matter. Whether the losing candidate concedes has no bearing on what happens on January 20th. And when it might come down to lawsuits and courts and the opinions of judges, maybe judges selected by Donald Trump, you don't want to do anything, the optics of which might make it easier for a judge to hand anything to Donald Trump. And although conceding is merely a formality, much like running up the score in the popular vote, these are optics which might provide cover for a judge to rule in favor of Donald Trump if it comes down to a court. And likewise, this is why I've said we have to run up the popular vote. You know, in heavily blue states like California and Massachusetts, there may be leftists who say, I'm not going to vote. They don't need my vote, or I'll vote third party because Biden's clearly going to win California. He's clearly going to win Massachusetts. I disagree. We have to run up the score. Make it harder for a court to help Donald Trump in any way, because Donald Trump is going to use every tactic possible to steal this election. Joe Biden and the Democrats need to have a specific plan for exactly how to deal with every aspect of this ahead of time. I'm not sure that they do. Now, let's deal just for a moment with what the right wingers are saying. Again, people like Hannity and some right wingers are reacting as if Hillary Clinton is saying, even if you really lose, don't concede. That's not what she's saying. She's saying she believes Joe Biden's going to win, but that there will be pressure on him to concede and foul play such that he might end up conceding before he's satisfied that he really lost and that he shouldn't do that. I'm the first to tell you, Biden may actually lose. At least 60 million people are going to be voting for the re-election of Donald Trump. Maybe 65 million, maybe 66. We don't know. But roughly 60 something million people will be voting for Trump's reelection. It's certainly plausible that Trump wins. And if that's the case, it's not for Joe Biden to just insist that he really won. Biden will have to concede, and I'm sure he will. And it'll be up to us to deal with the reality that we have more than 60 million people in this country who observed the last 4 years and said, give me another 4. That's a problem we'll have to deal with, and it's a serious problem. But the advice is correct to Joe Biden. Until you're actually satisfied that you really lost, don't concede, and I hope he follows it. Hopefully it won't even be close, but there's a real possibility that it will be. And those close scenarios, as I'm going to talk about Friday, are the ones that are going to be the most difficult legally and also the most likely to lead to violence in the streets, which I don't want to happen, but I fear is a real possibility if it's close and Trump says that it's rigged. I'll deal with that on Friday. And what is happening in the intervening time now is everybody's got to figure out, how are you planning to vote? Are you voting absentee? If so, are you mailing your ballot or dropping it off? Are you voting in person? What's the plan? Is it going to feel safe? How many masks will you be wearing? So on and so forth. That's what we can do in the intervening time. We will have more on this, much more, on our Instagram page. Make sure you're following us there at David Pakman Show. And also last night, I got a crazy hate mail and I posted it to my Instagram, which is david.pakman. My question to you is, do you think the hate mail I posted last night is real or fake? Take a look at it, david.pakman on Instagram. Let me know what you think.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
So I really hate that I was right about this, but I was right about this. Donald Trump and his FDA chairman, Stephen Hahn, dramatically and irresponsibly overhyped and oversold their announcement about convalescent plasma as a coronavirus treatment. And Stephen Hahn is now admitting it. And of course, it really shouldn't surprise any of us because they've been overhyping everything all along, going all the way back to hydroxychloroquine months ago. Now, I told you when Donald Trump held this completely belligerent, unhinged event on Sunday, promoted on Saturday as a huge announcement about coronavirus treatment. The announcement was the FDA has issued an emergency use authorization for convalescent plasma. This was suspicious. Convalescent plasma is a procedure. It's a transfusion of plasma from people who have recovered from coronavirus. The idea being that transfusing their plasma into people suffering from the virus could be an effective treatment. Now, the reason that it was suspicious from the get-go was because there was nothing new about convalescent plasma. So Donald Trump making a big announcement and trying to pat himself on the back as if this is an achievement for him or for his administration, that didn't make sense. And that was where I started to think there's something a little bit fishy going on here. And if you've been following coronavirus for months the way we have, you would know that convalescent plasma transfusions have been a potential treatment for coronavirus for months around the world. I have relatives in Argentina who have coronavirus. And 6 weeks ago, the possibility of giving them a convalescent plasma transfusion if they became sicker was a possibility. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. And so really the announcement was the FDA is issuing an emergency use authorization. The announcement was not really, we now can do this thing called convalescent plasma transfusions. It was, we're going to change the infrastructure from being able to do the convalescent plasma within a randomized controlled trial to doing it under an emergency use authorization. And that did not seem like a particularly good idea for the reasons I told you on Sunday and on Monday, including that it may start to be given to patients who are less sick and don't actually need something because they would recover naturally. And there are risks, including lung injury and other potential problems with these convalescent plasma transfusions. Also, giving when you have an RCT, a randomized controlled trial, you're really zeroing out confounding factors to try to focus in on what was the effect of the convalescent plasma. And when you do an EUA and you start giving the treatment to more people, including people who were going to recover anyway, it can falsely or deceptively incorrectly make the treatment seem more effective than it is. Okay, I told you all of that on Monday. Well, Stephen Hahn, the FDA's director, Stephen Hahn, has now conceded that, yes, it's true. He exaggerated the effectiveness of the treatment on Sunday. He doesn't even try to hide it. He tweeted at the end of a series of tweets, quote, "I have been criticized for remarks I made Sunday night about the benefits of convalescent plasma. The criticism is entirely justified. What I should have said better is that the data show a relative risk reduction and not an absolute risk reduction. This was totally obvious all along, and Trump's Sunday stunt was merely a stunt to try to take credit for something that, number one, has nothing to do with him whatsoever anyway, and number two, shock is not the miracle that they claim it is." Now, I guess, okay, let me do this. Hahn also went into some garbage math on Sunday. On Sunday, Hahn said the drug appears, or convalescent plasma treatment appears to lower mortality by 35%. So he said for every 100 people who get the virus, it saves 35 people. That's insane. Okay. Now, the reason I'm hesitating is the math is so stupid that I don't know if it's patronizing to even do this, but I think it's worth putting on the record. The death rate of coronavirus appears to be about 0.8% if you account for, all cases, not a case fatality rate, but a death rate. Let's call it 1%. What that means is that for every 100 people who get coronavirus, you would expect one to die, 1% death rate. So if convalescent plasma reduces mortality by 35%, if 1,000 people get the virus, you would expect that 10 would die, 1%, and convalescent plasma would potentially save 3 or 4 people, right? If it's 35%, it's 3.5 people per 1,000 that it would save based on a 1% mortality rate. Now, I want to be really clear. If that's true, that's important. That's significant. That's not nothing. Those numbers are shaky and it's not clear that that's what it is. But the press release from the FDA containing these claims was clearly a propaganda document written by the White House. And when Hahn, maybe he misstated and said from every 100 people that get it, this saves 35. From every 100 people that get it, you only expect one to die. So how could it save 35 when you only expect one to die? The tragic thing is, and if people get why this math is garbage, I apologize for going through that. The tragic thing is that for many of us, maybe it's obvious, but so many people are still falling for this stuff. And that's the real tragedy here. Dexamethasone tested globally, available globally for months. Donald Trump takes credit for it as one of the therapeutics that his administration has moved forward. They haven't done a damn thing about it. Remdesivir, tested globally, available globally for months, part of randomized controlled trials all over the country. Trump tries to take credit if it's something that his administration did. Dozens of vaccines under development. Many aren't even American companies developing the vaccines. The vaccine that ends up being the vaccine might end up being from Oxford University in the UK. Trump takes credit in advance under his Operation Warp Speed. They are lying all the time. And what I fear is that it will work. I still continue to think it is very likely that we get an announcement about we've got a vaccine. It's good to go around October 15th. Won't be available right away, not to many people. And Donald Trump will take credit and it'll shift 1 or 2% of the vote and that'll get him reelected. This fundamentally is going to be a situation that is dealt with by doctors and by public health in the United States and around the world. And it's going to be dealt with despite Donald Trump, not thanks to him. And Trump trying to claim heroic credit by saying we funded production of vaccine doses in advance. That's great. Multiple countries are doing that. Any sane leader would do that. It would be an injustice not to do that, to start producing vaccine doses in advance. Common tactic has nothing to do with Trump. Republicans and Trump are trying to create the illusion that their leadership has saved the day. In reality, there hasn't been leadership. And as far as having to walk back, the plasma stuff, the damage is already done. Way more people see the headline than see the correction. This is the MO of the Trump administration. You put out some hyperbole up front, people see it, they integrate it. Later, you correct it. Stephen Hahn says, I did oversell it a little bit. Very few people see it, and it's too late anyway. It's typical, it's a common strategy, and it's exactly what they're doing. Continuing with unsurprising coronavirus news, schools of all kinds have started to open, elementary, middle, high school, colleges, and universities, and coronavirus clusters are exploding. Now, I wish I could say, it really seemed like this wasn't going to happen. We're shocked by this. It was just unpredictable. We knew that this was going to happen. A few stories from around the country. At Purdue University, student cases on campus are already at 41 within just a few days of students moving in. Remember that it often takes 5 days to show symptoms. So certainly it's more than 41 cases that will ultimately be discovered at Purdue University's campus. In Florida, nearly 9,000 kids have tested positive in the 2 weeks since schools reopened. That brings the total number of cases in Florida among those under 18 to close to 50,000 cases. If you look across the country, you have about 750 colleges and universities now with cases. University of North Carolina is a bad one. They've had to send most undergraduate students home already. It's not even September. North Carolina had so many cases in the dorms that most undergrads have already been sent home. Notre Dame is delaying classes because dozens of students have tested positive there. Iowa State, dozens of cases in the dorms. One of the worst outbreaks is at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where there are nearly 1,000 cases. University of Central Florida, 750 cases. I'm not going to give you the whole list, but it's everywhere and it was completely predictable. Now, I want to remind everybody in the audience, because every time I talk about this, I get the same confused emails. I am not pretending, especially when it comes to school-age kids, elementary, middle school, high school, that this is a simple issue. This is not a simple issue. You have parents who can't work if their kids aren't in school. You have parents that have jobs that you can't work from home, but they don't pay enough to pay for childcare, meaning it wouldn't make sense if their kids are at home to go to work and pay for childcare. They just can't work. They've got to stay home. That's a systemic problem with the country. We've not done enough in terms of stimulus compared to other countries. It is a complicated situation, but it is a systemic problem. You, of course, have parents who just insist this is no big deal and want to send their kids to school. You have parents who believe, coronavirus conspiracy theories. You have all that stuff. But the real problem is not so much parents choosing to send their kids to school because they're not worried about the virus. This is really a systemic problem that has put a lot of parents into untenable situations. Now, that's different than colleges and universities. We're talking about, if things go correctly, you just need to do remote learning in the fall. Clearly, this fall semester should be done remote. It should be done online. It should have been done from day one. Some schools did it. Others have refused to do it. We're not talking about forever. And I get that if you're an incoming freshman, this is not a fun way to start college. This is probably not even the best way to start college from the perspective of learning. I get it. But let's not miss the forest for the trees. Having to shut down a semester in progress and send people home, sometimes days after the semester started, it's way more disruptive than just saying, hey guys, it sucks, but we're going to do remote for the fall. And then hopefully in the spring, we can start to go back to normal. Spending the time developing a good remote learning system for the fall, rather than bringing students in, endless testing, cases pop up, sending students home, it would have made far more sense. Elementary, middle, high school, I'm not pretending it isn't complicated. The problems are more systemic than they are individual. Our federal government has failed, quite simply.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, let's talk about something that I think probably some people in the audience are just not going to be thrilled that I'm talking about. But this upcoming election is of such utmost and total importance. The removal of Donald Trump is such an existential imperative that we can't have anybody handing Trump any gift, any fodder whatsoever that he may be able to use to get himself reelected. And unfortunately, yesterday, Donald Trump was handed a gift as a video went viral of a group of Black Lives Matter protesters in Washington, D.C., surrounding and intimidating and screaming at a random woman who was just sitting outside at a restaurant and demanding that she raise her fist and show solidarity with protesters. We have video. It's literally video of a mob surrounding a random woman and screaming at her. This is the opposite of what we need right now. This is exactly the type of video that the right can use to criticize protesters. And quite frankly, this is perfect video to help Trump. If you were trying to help Trump, this is exactly what you would stage and film. I'm going to show you the video. I'll describe it. It's a crowd of video. It's a video of a crowd of people with fists raised, really tightly gathered around a woman who's sitting outdoors at a restaurant in D.C. They're so close to her that she's literally leaning back with her head almost up against the wall. Take a look. Take a listen if you're not watching. Here's another video a little more zoomed out where you can see sort of the bigger picture scene. You're also going to see a protester asking that white people step forward. I guess they thought the optics of white people intimidating the woman would somehow be better. I don't know. Take a look. So listen, guys, there's just no defending this. We shouldn't even, I don't want anybody to even try to defend it. We're better off if we just say this isn't the right strategy. This is a disaster. This is stupid activism. This is counterproductive activism. And I know that there are going to be some people who are going to write to me and they'll say, David, you privileged whatever. How dare you criticize this? Protesting shouldn't just be when it's comfortable. If this woman is sitting outside having, a $14 cocktail, I don't know what she's having, but whatever it is people are going to say, who are you to say it's not okay to make her uncomfortable? Activism isn't always comfortable. If we only protested when and where they say it's okay, we would never get anywhere. What I'm telling you is that this is counterproductive. The woman who was surrounded said later, she's with the protesters. She's previously marched with protesters, but here she felt under attack. These are not only intimidation tactics, they are dumb intimidation tactics. They are handing gifts to Trump when they do things like this. There's no upside to this. She was already on their side. I don't know of anyone who was lukewarm, who's going to see this and say, oh, now I'm joining the movement. The movement gains nothing from this. It doesn't help the cause. Now, does it maybe make the protesters feel good in some way? Maybe. I'd feel terribly if I was there intimidating this woman. Maybe there are people who feel good when they do something like this, but it achieves nothing. We don't have to talk about the morality or the ethics. We can just be pragmatists and recognize it plays directly into Donald Trump's hands. I actually am asking myself, do they care if Trump gets reelected? Because there's a reality. I don't know the specifics of the politics of these individuals, but there are people who see Biden as just as much the enemy as Donald Trump. And if that's the case, they may not care that this type of thing plays directly into Donald Trump's hands. If that's the case, that's a big problem. It's a different problem. And I would disagree with them. And, we could figure that out. I've discussed that problem ad nauseum for months. But why are we giving people ammunition? What are we doing? This is completely counterproductive. And fortunately, I wasn't sure. I haven't seen everybody's reaction to this, people that work in my space. But for the most part, most of the people who I follow on Twitter on the left who have tweeted about this, have denounced it. And that's what it just needs to be. This is not what we're advocating for. This is bad. This doesn't help the movement. This helps Donald Trump. this is a bad idea. Hopefully that will be the consensus. So there's a guy who called into C-SPAN after the first deranged and depraved evening of the Republican National Convention. And the guy called in and said he's a lifelong Democrat, but the first night of the Republican convention has convinced him to switch his vote and vote for Donald Trump. Now, I'm going to play the call for you in a moment. But what I want to raise ahead of time is, in reaction to what I'm about to play for you, there's a lot of people who are debating, is the guy for real or is he a troll? Is this for real or is the guy faking and he's really a Trump guy who just called C-SPAN and said that he's a lifelong Democrat? I have some thoughts about that, but I'm actually going to make the case that it doesn't matter, and I'll explain why. But first, let's take a look at the video.
Rick in Lorain, Ohio, Democrat. Hi, Rick.
How you doing tonight? I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm from Lorain, Ohio, which is a Democrat city in Ohio. And I just want to say, after watching the convention tonight on TV, on C-SPAN here, I am definitely changing my vote to Republican. And I'll tell you what, they just put the Democratic Party or the Republican Party to shame. I'm going to follow the Republican Party now.
But why? What was it that convinced you about tonight?
It was the heartfelt way they came across to the American people, and I was really touched by the number of times they used the word God. They put God into everything, and the people on the Democratic side on their convention act like they were pushing God right out of it. And that had a lot to do with changing my mind.
Now, Rick, did you say you were a union member?
No, sir. I'm from Lorain, Ohio, and we are a Democrat town here and have been for 50 years.
That's it. Thank you so much.
So in terms of whether this is for real or whether this is really a Trump guy who's lying that he's a lifelong Democrat, the guy said that he's calling from a Democrat city in Ohio. I've never met a lifelong Democrat who calls cities Democrat cities. That's how the right talks. That's literally a term out of Trump's playbook from the last 2 or 3 years. So I think that there's certainly reason to doubt whether this guy is sincerely a lifelong Democrat who was convinced to switch and vote for Trump from night one of the from the RNC rather. But it doesn't matter. Okay. This is sort of like looking at retail versus wholesale. The question isn't whether this one guy was really convinced to vote for Trump because of the RNC. Someone in a country of 331 million people with 120 to 135 million expected to vote, someone I'm sure is going to be convinced to vote Trump who was previously thinking they were going to go vote Biden by the RNC. The point is the big picture. First, it's the big picture of conventions. If history is an indicator, conventions don't really do much for either candidate. Typically what you see is one candidate has a convention and they get a little bump, and then the other candidate has a convention and they get a little bump, and then it fades, and by October, nobody remembers it, and we've moved on to other things. The right has tried to make the case that there is a massive movement of Democrats abandoning the Democratic Party and jumping ship to vote for Donald Trump. It's not backed up by the data that we have. There's no doubt that there are disaffected Democrats who don't like the fact that Joe Biden is a candidate. Some of them are going to stay home. Some of them are going to vote for Donald Trump. Likewise, there are people who voted Trump in 2016 who are going to vote for Biden. There is no evidence right now that there are large numbers of Democrats defecting to the Republican Party or planning to vote for Donald Trump. The one caller is not really newsworthy. But there is the more interesting and deeper question about the bigger picture here, which is, are people switching parties? What we know is that most 2016 Trump voters are going to vote for Trump again. What we know is that most 2016 Hillary voters are going to vote for Biden. What we know is that independents are leaning towards Joe Biden. And ultimately, this is going to come down to who votes in which states and how much of the vote can Donald Trump suppress. So maybe it's true that this particular guy was a lifelong Democrat and he was convinced after a life of voting for Democrats to vote for Donald Trump because of Kimberly Guilfoyle screaming on Monday night at the Republican National Convention. Or, as he says, because the Republican convention kept mentioning God. The truth, of course, is that in reality, Joe Biden is more religious than Donald Trump. It's not something I care about, But for people who want a religious candidate, there's no question that Donald Trump's religiosity is completely fabricated and fake as something to appeal to evangelical voters with Trump as a politician, whereas Joe Biden actually seems to be a moderately devout Catholic. I don't care about that, but if you're looking for the religious candidate, it's not Donald Trump, it's Joe Biden. But sure, the caller might be making it up as well. It doesn't matter if we all go out and vote, period. And that is ultimately going to be the one test. It's not, did this guy switch in Ohio? By the way, Ohio not looking as good for Joe Biden as it did before, or I guess better said, looking better for Donald Trump recently than it did before. What matters is if we all go out and vote and the large numbers. And so I wouldn't be lulled into a false debate about whether it's possible that the RNC really shifted a Democrat into voting for Trump. I'm sure some Democrats did get convinced to vote Trump from the RNC, and some Republicans were convinced to vote for Joe Biden from the DNC. We're a country of 331 million. The big picture is what matters. Let's not lose sight of that. And the big picture is Trump's going to try to win by suppressing the vote. Trump's going to try to win by rigging the election. That's the big picture, not whether this guy is a troll. We have a voicemail number, which you can call anytime. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is just an absolutely delightful caller saying, my metaphor about crawling over broken glass to vote for Biden, she says it literally applies to her. Take a listen to this.
Hi, David. This is your fan in rural Florida who can only get you on Free Speech TV. I just wanted to tell you that when you said some people would crawl over broken glass to vote, I burst out laughing, not because it was funny, but because you were describing me to a T. I already voted by mail in my primary because I'm 68 years old and I've been stress eating for 4 years, so I'm likely to die from the virus. But now I intend to wear double masks and turn in my ballot to vote in person. Nothing will stop me from voting against Trump. I just hope beyond hope there are enough of us. Keep up the great work, David. Thanks.
What a caller. What a caller. Just absolutely fantastic. And, you know, there's the debates over who's motivated, which party is more motivated or less motivated or what. It's going to come down to individuals like our terrific caller who say, I'm going to figure out how to vote. And whether I'm figuratively crawling over broken glass, which includes crawling, getting around the landmines of voter suppression that are being placed out there, or literally crawling over broken glass, or what may be, understaffed and under-resourced polling places, or whatever the case may be, wearing 2 masks, etc. She's going to figure out how to vote. And that's ultimately what this election is going to come down to. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. There's a call from pediatricians to end these active shooter trainings that have become very common in schools. And their argument is that the trainings do relatively little if there is actually an active shooter. It's such a chaotic situation that the trainings really don't do much. But the fact that the trainings are happening may be traumatizing to students and may be causing them to live in what is still statistically an irrational fear, given the low likelihood of an active shooter scenario. I want to talk about that. The CDC has also removed its 14-day quarantine guideline for people coming back from out of state or overseas. And I want to talk about why and whether it's a science-based decision or a politically based decision. We are also going to hear about more of the protests that are re-erupting. We're going to hear from lawyers. We're going to hear from protesters. It's a crazy situation that is again developing. I don't really know that it's getting the attention it deserves, and we're going to spend some time on that on today's bonus show. So 2 ways to get instant access to the bonus show. Number 1, become a member at joinpacman.com. Number 2, become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. And then reminder, you can join me tonight at 8:15 p.m. Eastern for night 3 of the Republican National Convention. I'll be streaming live on YouTube and on Twitch. I will see you then. Thanks so much for watching today's full episode of the show. Just a reminder, today's sponsor is Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist for free and save 25% off of a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've also included the link right underneath this video.